The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Reynardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo... These things could really use a hand. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
The contraption wasn't even trying anymore. As if it knew it had met its match. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. Doubt sunk in before he was even out of sight of the Farfarer. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? It was the sort of path he'd always avoided. The path of responsibility, of seriousness. Had he grown up? He didn't feel grown up. He'd made this decision from his gut, like he always did. Somehow, he'd impulsively decided to stop being impulsive. Did that make any sense? There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be. Hey, who do I have to kill to get a drink around here? You? Okay. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now he had to make his next move. there was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Reynardo had never been much of a student. At Swordfu School, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Sky Ripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists. Right?
Reynardo actually could think of a few things that were worse. But he would make sure they didn't happen this time. Right?
Exactly. As he set out down the path, Reynardo wondered why the parts of the Sky Ripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction.
And hopefully this time, just his destruction.
Reynardo had learned so much. It was time to turn it into something he could use. He was tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. It made strange, mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum.
The Sky Ripper was following his every step. At least it acknowledged him as the master. But there was no trigger. How was he supposed to fire it? "Fire," he said. Nothing happened. Well, maybe it just needed to warm up. After all, it hadn't been fired in thousands of years.
The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them.
Reynardo had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame.
Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out.
"Reynardo!"
It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia.
"Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world."
"Yeah, sure it will," cracked Reynardo. "Pull the other one."
"If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras."
That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating.
Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it.
Just this once, he would not let Zenobia get into his head with her logic and her wisdom and her appeals to reason. He was a fox. He'd go with his instincts, and it would all work out like it always did. Oh, he was sounding like a reckless idiot, even to himself. But if there was one thing Reynardo could never bring himself to do, it was turn back on a decision he'd made. Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of the superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon.
Funny about librarians. People thought of them as fussy clerks who shushed them for talking. But the librarians thought of their books as sacred, and themselves as priests in a temple of knowledge. Who knew they were willing to die to protect it? He wondered if the council knew he destroyed the outpost. He hoped so. He was excited. With his superweapon, they could actually win their battle with the Imperial fleet.
What was Zenobia talking about? This was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. He was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. She'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, No one was going to distract him.
You know what I hate about you guys? Everything.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. As he headed towards the council chamber, Reynardo felt everyone watching him.
"You've saved the rebellion," said the council speaker. "Frankly, we were afraid you'd turn aside to see that idiot Lapino."
Not bloody lightly, Reynardo told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit.
"If you never make sacrifices," he said, "you're probably not doing the right thing." The speaker nodded. "Are you ready to lead the charge?" "Let's roll," he said, with grim satisfaction. Reynardo set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its wine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself.
He was ready. So was Sky Ripper. The Sky Ripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire.
This was going to be a short battle. He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero.
Portal that led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. This was the craziest weapon he'd ever used. Or not. There was a parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender.
He'd done it. He'd played chicken with Zenobia and won. He could hear the horns blaring the retreat. She was wiser than he was, that was for sure. But wisdom didn't win battles. He was tempted to just stand on the device and let it do all the killing for him. But that wouldn't be sporting, would it? Or fun?
And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him. Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too. You're the enemy, he said. I was never your enemy, Reynardo.
And he realized, not for the first time, how much she loved him.
Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire.
He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again, faster than before, and he fell.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the ravens?
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late.
Death to traitors! Cawed the ravens.
What's behind door number 2? Reynardo was running out of ideas. Zenobia loved him to death. The Sky Ripper destroyed everything. Lapino was a filthy traitor. Using a stone name for an evil god seemed unwise. What else was there? Reynardo felt bad for littering, but these islands were short on trash cans. Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Reynardo hated cannon traps. Also, who reloaded these things anyway? He never figured that part out.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Reynardo wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. The core, said the stone anxiously. Why was he listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself.
To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies.
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Reynardo had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feed souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood. All right, I get it. This was going to be interesting.
A chest full of old banana peels. There had to be more. There was.
The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him.
He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he?
Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Reynardo, a little smug.
Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled.
She spotted the stone and bolted without another word.
You shall not pass!
Finally, Reynardo caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. "Kill her," whispered the stone. "You cannot win your rebellion without it. Please." "No," said Zenobia. "Not that way." Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Reynardo felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such brilliance, exulted the Iblis stone. Tasty.
He felt a bit bad about killing her. He was pretty sure she still loved him. But needs must when the devil drives. Reynardo returned to the Farfarer and set a course for the Nexus. The Empire had a communication outpost there. He could call the Emperor directly.
It was time to seize the outpost and let the Emperor know what he had done. The Nexus was beautiful. He'd never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. The black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke, under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there.
You brushed. Oh.
Up ahead was Lapino. What was he doing here?
Reynardo! Hey, buddy! Hey there, old buddy! Please don't kill me!
Why would I kill you? Asked Reynardo, although he had been thinking about it.
Well, you've become... no, I mean, no disrespect at all here. Kind of evil? Maybe you should, I don't know, go to the mountains to have a think? See if maybe you're sure the stone is not all that healthy a thing to keep?
I suppose you wanted, Reynardo said, and poked Lapino in the chest for emphasis. Oh, had he just killed Lapino? Oh, damn it.
He'd go to the outpost, use their far speaker, tell the Emperor what he'd done, and then he'd go to the secret rebel base, let them know he was ready to lead them to victory.
Reynardo rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the Far-Speaker Toad. After all, he wanted a word with the Emperor.
But there was only silence. The Emperor was scared, like little girl.
Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Yes! Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his Far-Speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lapino. What are you doing? Demanded the Iblistone. I need to think, Reynardo told it. You're not good at thinking, said the Iblistone. You're a king. It's what you do. It's your destiny. But he set sail for the mountains, where he could be alone with his thoughts. Why were there Raven Scouts here in the empty mountains? Was there nowhere he could find peace and quiet? There were other ravens here too. Shadowy ones, transparent, lining the path. Ghosts. They cawed as he passed, but they didn't try to stop him. Spectators. Had he really killed that many ravens? Reynardo. Then he saw her. Zenobia. She was a ghost too. She ran off when she saw him. How could a ghost be afraid? He followed her. He had to. Reynardo followed Zenobia's ghost. Had he gone mad, seeing ghosts? Was she running from him or leading him somewhere? He'd come here to be alone, but he'd never been less alone in his life. Every raven he had slain haunted these rocks. Was this who he was? A killer. He was terribly good at killing. He was an adventurer. Or was that just another word for killer? You kill, whispered the stone. It is what you must for. This destiny.
tried to focus on the job he had to do. The rebellion. Wasn't there a battle coming soon? Would there be ravens to kill? Even an emperor? Such killing. Much wow. Oh, he'd never been so excited. At the end of the mountain path, Zenobia awaited him.
Why did you kill me? She said. I was your prisoner, and I loved you. I needed the power, he said. Haven't you heard? There's a war on.
Then what's your excuse for killing me?
Asked his old friend Lapino, stepping out of the shadows.
Because the filthy traitor? Said Reynardo.
For once, Lapino didn't reply.
The demon has twisted you, said Zenobia. Abandon the stone. You've lost too much already. Her words bit deeper than any sword ever had. So he shook his head, and once again swung his blade through her and Lapino. It had to all mean something. If he gave up the stone now, he would have sacrificed Zenobia and Lapino for nothing.
So, Reynardo set course for the Imperial fleet, where he would end it all. The Emperor, the war, the madness. Reynardo boarded an Imperial ship. No one could stop him slashing his way towards the Emperor. Yes, that was right. To give up now would be to lose everything for nothing. But if he could liberate the land from the mad Emperor, then he could give up the stone in peace. And those were absolutely his own thoughts. Not the stone manipulating him, right?
Oh, yes, exulted the stone. Feel your power. He could hear a tiny voice within him. Don't kill the Emperor. Stone by the soul. Madness? I have to kill the Emperor, he told himself. That's what it meant to be a hero. To do what had to be done, no matter how terrible the cost. Yes. And then you can have peace, promised the stone. The tiny voice, whatever it was silent. He couldn't see ghosts around him, but he could feel them. If he gave up now, they would be angry. They would have all died for nothing. Who could give up this kind of power? Could anyone? Oh, he was just a fox with a talent for swordplay. How had this burden come to him? The Emperor offered the sword. Yes, peace. That is what he wanted now.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? The Emperor was cowering in front of his ship.
Please don't kill me.
Croaked Emperor Isengrim III.
Here, take the crown. I don't want it anymore.
We must kill him. Or he will have his troops. He must send assassins.
Please, have mercy. The rebellion is won. Or you could be emperor. I'll just go be a scientist. Or minstrel. Or sell gummy bears. Yeah, I promise not to bother you.
It's the moment.
With all the love he'd ever had for Zenobia, for Lupino, for the kit foxes he would never have, Reynardo raised his sword. And Reynardo plunged his sword into his own chest.
Wait. What?
Reynardo screamed as his life force ebbed into the stone and surged back into him, and ebbed out and surged back in. Screamed the stone. It began to heat up.
What have you done?
The stone began to glow. It became white hot. It became lava. Nice knowing you, said Reynardo, as the lava ran like butter. And he died. He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. But he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again, faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course. Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis Stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Reynardo was sure he could master it.
And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late.
Kill the rebel! Caught one raven. Eat the rebel! Caught another. How could you convince a firewall you're its friend? There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Reynardo was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people. The ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. This wasn't actually such a hard puzzle, come to think of it. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. It was the stone eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once.
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "The core," said the stone anxiously.
But even though Reynardo knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
Why was he listening to a talking rock?
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Reynardo had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feed souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood. All right, I get it. This was going to be interesting. The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him.
He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? These things really slice like ham. Zenobia was waiting.
Finally, Reynardo caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Please, no, said Zenobia. Not that way. Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Reynardo felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such brilliance, exulted the Iblis stone. The Nexus was beautiful. He never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. The black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke, under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there.
Oh, what does the fox say?
Asked one raven. Another one called back.
Oh, I'm dying!
And they both laughed hysterically. Up ahead was Lupino. He'd go to the outpost. Reynardo rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment.
But there was only silence. The Emperor was scared, like little girl.
Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Yes! Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his far speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lupino. Reynardo called the rebel council to let them know to gather their forces. Then he killed the far speaker toad. Why? Well, because to make sure his sword was sharp. Oh no, that's awful. So no one else could use it. Yes, that's it. Then he set off for the ruins and the secret rebel base. The ruins were crawling with ravens. Probably looking for the secret base, Reynardo thought. But then he realized they're probably looking for me. They must be very scared of me. Well, here I am. You are the best warrior ever, whispered the Iblistone. And he had to agree with it, for once. Who was as good as Reynardo?
Hypatia had been the first woman who'd ever tried to convince Reynardo he was smart. He knew he wasn't nearly as clever as he thought he was. But she'd pushed him to think things through. She had a vision of him that was better than his own. Reynardo was so happy. The stone was the best friend he'd ever had. Really, who would bury such a treasure in the desert? Soon, he'd go rally the rebellion and usher a new age for the islands of Erda.
Urged the stone. Let me make you emperor. Come to think of it, Reynardo thought as he put down another raven, why shouldn't I be emperor? How did anybody get to be emperor anyway? By making war. I'm not counting the transcendent emperor, obviously, who had banished the lost gods and started time. Yes, he should be emperor. He would make a great emperor. Right, Stone? Oh, right, boss.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
Reynardo strode into the council. Let's do this thing. Let's make me emperor. They looked confused and nervous. Ah, had he mentioned the emperor thing? He meant to bring that up later. I mean, let's go win this rebellion. He waved his sword around encouragingly. They ran. Cowards. He'd stop them. He cut down a few to inspire the others. But soon, there was no one to cut down. Well then, he'd have to attack the fleet alone. More for me, he said. Unless it was the stone that said it. Traitors. Traitors, all of them. They'd run rather than following him, rather than cheering him. What should he do to the cowards? Anything he wanted to. After all, he was a true hero, the best warrior there ever was. No one could stop him now. But first, finish him. The Emperor, that is. Where was the rebel fleet? They weren't even trying an assault. They were going to miss a day in history. The downfall of this dynasty, and a new one to take its place. He didn't have to kill all the ravens. He could enslave them. And enslave the toads, too. All the animals would worship him as a god. Or he had once been a god. They would willingly give him their blood and their soul. And the world would change, would become familiar again.
His mother had never let him wave his sword around at home. He guessed he was still compensating for that.
Reynardo was glowing with dark power. Already the sun had dimmed. He could do anything, he realized. He could wrap the island safely in smoke again. He was beyond a hero. He was going to become a god again. How odd, he thought, that the Iblis Stone had nothing to say about any of this. Well, no matter. Once he killed this petty toad emperor, he would bring back the Black Sun.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time.
He found the Emperor and the Council huddling by his ship, plotting. They saw him and cowered before him.
Back to hell, fiend.
Croaked the Emperor desperately.
In the name of the Transcendent Emperor,
Croaked the Speaker. They held some arcane items he didn't recognize. He simply flexed his will and sucked their souls out of their bodies. And Iblis exulted. It is finished. And the void that had been a mere stone on a sword expanded. It stretched and ripped like a vast womb. And a gaze, black and pitiless as the sun, passed through the void into the land. And so time ended.
Oh, again?
But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino.